Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, my students, and welcome to our class, especially for Kazakhstan students today. And I'm Sindy Yulia Putri, and I would like to explain or discuss today concerning Indonesia and international trade cooperations. This material is delivered for this meeting, namely the fourth meeting for our course, yeah, in Indonesia in international political economy. So I move to the first slide. So actually, what is the GATT or WTO, and how is it transformed? So the GATT, or the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, was established in 1947, and this was an international system or forum of institution in the trade sectors. It changed the name and regulations from GATT to WTO in 1995 through the Uruguay round. And this change or transformation of GATT to WTO due to several things, namely the first one, for pay more attention to trade in goods, but pay less attention to service and sector trade. So for GATT was focused on mostly good trade, but really less attention to service trade. And the second, ad hoc nature, and the third, still setting tariff restrictions, but not yet setting non-tariff restrictions. And the fourth is it is considered to put the interest of developed countries too far. And the last is the expansion of regulations for various types of products, from ordinary products to luxury products. So next, yeah, I have here the explanations or the narrative of GATT or WTO principles for trade or business activities. You can also read for two sides, yeah, the first one and the second one, and also the below here. So the first one here, yeah, the first principle of WTO is the most favored nations or non-discriminations principle. The concessions granted to a trading partner country must also apply to all other countries. And the national treatment here below prohibit different treatment between foreign goods and domestic goods. When imported goods enter the domestic market of a member, and after passing through the customs area and paying import duties, the imported goods must be treated equally in the host country. So this is called as national treatment. And the third is the tariff as single instrument for protection. Protection for domestic produce and restrictions imposed on imported goods can be applied in a dual way, including taking into account the impact. And the binding tariff, commitments that bind member countries so as not to increase import duties on imported goods after they are included in the list of binding commitments. So next, I have also three other principles of WTO. The fair competition here, to deal with dumping and export subsidy. The importing country is given the right to impose anti-dumping duties and countervailing duties as compensation as compensation or countermeasures against dumping or exports subsidies. And the below one, safeguard. Countries may carry out safeguards to protect their domestic producers who suffer losses caused by a surge in imports. And here, prohibition of quantitative restrictions. So the exceptions allowed in the GATT or WTO are quantitative restrictions that are applied when dealing with balance of payments problems. This exception is in Article 12, and quantitative restrictive measures taken by a member country must not exceed the time limit required to address balance of payments problems and must be gradually reduced or eliminated after the country's balance of payments is resolved. And the trade barriers of in is regulated in WTO. The first one, tariff barrier, the application of actually the tariff barriers are included are divided to barriers. The first one, tariff barriers, and the second one, non-tariff barriers. Barriers other than tariff these barriers such as in the form of quota system, while qualitative restrictions are carried out by applying certain rules so that foreign products do not easily enter the host country. For protectionism here, right? Protectionism is state efforts to formulate economic policies to protect the domestic economy from the domination of foreign products. Some forms of or some types of protectionism are the first one, protecting duties, import tariffs on foreign products to protect domestic products. The second is prohibitions of rival activities, import bans on products from competitors' countries. The third one is prohibitions exportation of materials of manufacturers, prohibitions on the export of manufactured products, especially if other countries can produce it cheaper. And the fourth is judicious regulations for inspection of manufactured commodities, legal arrangements governing in the inspection of manufactured commodities to provide product quality assurance to consumers and avoid smuggling. And we can also discuss about Doha round or putaran Doha in bahasa Indonesia, right there, right? So this round is held in Qatar in 2001, and the preparation of the Doha Development Agenda or DDA goal lower trade barriers around the world so as to increase global trade. Since 2008, negotiations stagnated, and differences in the interest of member countries have emerged, such as agriculture, industrial tariffs, non-tariff barriers, and trade in services. And in 2013, when the WTO ministerial meeting was held in Bali, Indonesia, the Bali Declaration to reduce bureaucratic barriers to trade is an agreement in the WTO, and a total of 161 WTO member countries negotiate on subsidies for farmers domestic. In fact, the deadlock occurs because of the interest between the US and China regarding subsidized agriculture in developing countries. And the Doha round, So actually from the international relations, more actors, more interest. So that's why the Doha round was so really wasting time. And there are also conflict interest, yeah, from of developed and developing countries. For developed countries here, all right, the developed countries perspective, the rules applied by the WTO apply to all members, so that even developing countries must comply on regulations. And stabilizing the international economy and the equitable distribution of products global, escalation of product competitiveness of developed and developing countries. And developing countries have the opportunity to increase regional and international competitiveness in order to expand the global market. And for the developing countries perspective here, we can also observe that the WTO only accommodates the interest of the state forward for trade liberalization, and developing countries tend to be disadvantaged in this time because they cannot fully protect themselves to protect local entrepreneurs. And there is still a disparity in product competitiveness between developing and developed countries or welfare states, so that the developing country products may not be able to fully penetrate the global market. And there is also a business oligopolistic where only a few big entrepreneurs are able to play at the international level. And the WTO has also the dispute settlement mechanism. You can also here read, yeah. So the dispute settlement mechanism, or DSM, actually the specialized agency or agency for dispute resolution at the WTO, is the dispute settlement body. There are 4 stages on this mechanism. For instance, consultation, panel, appellate body, and decision making at the last. And the role of the DSB or dispute settlement body in Article 25 of the dispute settlement understanding, or the DSU. The first is consultation or pre-panel process. The SB plays a role in the sustainability of the existing dispute process between the parties by positioning itself as a mediator, and will provide assistance to parties who are trying to resolve the disputes they face either through consultation or mediation, and sometimes through arbitration. And the second, panel anti-appellate body process. The SB will assist the disputing parties in the panel making process, determine what is deemed necessary, and decide whether to adopt the panel or appellate body report. And the third is implementation of decisions. The DSB is responsible for ensuring the implementation of any recommendations or decisions adopted. The DSB has the authority to determine the winner of a dispute and implement trade sanctions for the guilty party. And the legal basis for developing countries in dispute resolution here, the above explanation. The specific provisions for developing countries in relation to the consultation and panel process can be found in Article 3, paragraph 12, Article 4, paragraph 10, Article 8, paragraph 10, Article 12, paragraph 10, and Article 12 paragraph 11 TSU. Developing countries litigating in this appeal process can use Rule 16.1 of the working procedures, and other special provisions are also contained in Article 4 of the GATS agreement In addition, Article 21, Paragraph 2 of the DSU also provides special provisions for developing countries. In implementing the DSB decisions, there are several special circumstances that must be considered in relation to domestic conditions. And what the WTO needs actually to consider in resolving disputes between or among members. So it is necessary to review the time allocated for each WTO dispute resolution process. The time that must be taken by the parties at this time from the beginning of the process to the appeal and adoption process takes up to 1.5 years or 1.5 years, and it's necessary to make concerted efforts by the WTO Secretariat in order to improve the skills of officials, the business community, the private sector, academics, and legal experts with sufficient knowledge and expertise in litigation in the DSB forum. DSB is expected to always try to position all member countries as sovereign states there that are egalitarian or equal. And the WTO reforms and its impacts for Indonesia, the role of WTO needs to be done so that it can act fairly on trade between member countries, both developed or welfare developing and less developing countries. The issue of WTO reform was presented by the European Union and Canada in July 2018. They proposed tightening subsidies, increasing the transparency of subsidies, making rules to overcome trade restrictions through digital platforms, making new rules to overcome barriers in services and investment, reforming special and differential treatment schemes for developing countries. And Canada as well suggested improving the efficiency and effectiveness of the WTO's ability to monitor its members for transparency, strengthening the dispute settlement system, and modernizing trade rules to anticipate the needs of the current global economy. And the reformation of WTO itself, China emphasized really that the WTO reforms must prioritize the multilateral trading system, protect the interest of developing countries, and maintain consensus in decision making. The issue of WTO reform should be inclined to fight for the rights of developing countries as suppliers of trade raw materials. And WTO response, since 2001, the WTO has placed the interest of developing countries on the agenda of international trade negotiations. The ministerial declaration adopted at the start of the Doha Development Round trade negotiations in November 2001 was a promising response to the anti-globalization unrest of the 1990s. In fact, however, the WTO failed to deliver the promised pro-development changes. Reflecting on the Doha round, developing countries are sidelined by political economic interest in international orders and global power. And the main thing that must be reformed, the multilateral trading system, or MTS, has actually triggered an increase in protectionism, tariff and non-tariff barriers, specifically by great powers such as the United States and also China. And the reform of WTO. So how is the Indonesia situation for this problematic? As a result, global trade governance becomes ineffective. So Indonesia needs to work together with developing countries that support MTS to be proactive in formulating new WTO rules. Indonesia must appear together with ASEAN member states, Australia, South Korea, need to encourage Japan, which is the country with the third largest economy in the 2019 in G20 session in Japan, to resolve trade issues in a multilateral direction. Moreover, Indonesia will host the G20 in 2022. The next reform is to increase the number of judges. Currently, the number of judges is not only disproportionate to the number of cases, which result in protected dispute resolution. What's more, and moreover, every decision taken is more detrimental to developing countries and benefits developed countries. The composition of just judges also does not represent the interest of all member countries in the WTO. There are only 3 judges in the appellate body who are from America, China, and India as well. For this reason, it is necessary to propose that the appellate body structure puts forward the principle of representation by increasing the number of judges itself. And for example, I bring one example here, like Indonesia and Korea relationship in maritime sector. The AKFTA, you can call or mention AKFTA as ASEAN Korea Foreign Trade Agreement cooperation framework can be a good opportunity for Indonesia to partner with South Korea, considering that South Korea is an East Asian country that has successfully dominated 30% of the world market for shipbuilding industry since 2007. South Korea's shipping industry is dominated by several companies such as Hyundai Heavy Industries, Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering or DSME, Samsung Heavy Industries, and Hanjin Heavy Industries Corporation. Meanwhile, on the one hand, the Indonesian shipping industry is targeting the construction of larger vessels up to 800,000 DWT. In addition, Indonesia is also trying to increase the capacity and capability of the 200 shipyards listed in the latest industrial blueprint. Currently, Indonesia has 2,154 ports, which include 111 commercial ports, 1,129 non-commercial ports, and 914 special ports, namely ports that function as special terminals. In 2013, the marine fleet operating in Indonesia totaled 17,838 vessels, consisting of 13,120 national ships, 354 foreign submarines, and 4,364 foreign ships against. And for Indonesia and position of Indonesia in IKFTA, Indonesia and South Korea take advantage of reciprocal and complementary cooperations. Indonesia excels in abundant natural resources, a skilled workforce, and a broad and active market. Meanwhile, South Korea's advantage lies in its capital and capable technology. Then, in trade cooperation in the maritime sector, the AKFTA agreement has an impact on positive trade elasticity between Indonesia and South Korea. Trade elasticity encourages an increase in export volume. The cooperation between Indonesia and South Korea within the framework of AKFTA is a form of constructive cooperation, both from an economic and political perspective. From an economic perspective, Indonesia has benefited from this cooperation in the development of the maritime industry, starting from maritime infrastructure, various trainings to improve the competence of human resources in the maritime sector, and investment in the sector. For Indonesia, South Korea has a crucial role in the regional and international order in advancing the maritime sector. With the latest shipping technology or the advanced technology of shipping, South Korea is able to transfer technology to Indonesia. Meanwhile, from a political perspective, Indonesia Indonesian centrality in ASEAN is increasingly being taken into account to strengthen diplomatic relations bilaterally and multilaterally. So for discussion, I want to trigger this question. Don't you agree if WTO is beneficial for all member countries? Right? Please argue. And then the follow-up questions, how do developing countries and less developing countries or LDCs positions themselves in the WTO? How can developing countries and LDCs benefit from the WTO? And how about the relationship between Indonesia and member states in the WTO and Indonesia's relationship with Indonesia domestically and with WTO itself? So thank you so much. I think it's enough for me. And terima kasih. Thank you. Many thanks. Stay healthy and wealthy. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Goodbye.